Well, hello, my beautiful flowers. Welcome to another episode of the Withered Flowers podcast. I am joined by Digital Girl,
Hey, hey.
and today we are going to be talking about chapter 2 of Tears on a Withered Flower. But before we begin, Digital Girl, how was your holidays? Like, did you have a good one? Did you get with family?
It was a very calm holiday season for me. I was happy to have family in town and we spent time. And I think really the big thing for me is spending quality time with the people that I love. So I got to do that without running myself ragged. And I feel more rested than I've ever felt. I guess I'm off to a good start with the year. What about you?
Kind of quiet, but I'm not going to complain. I hung out with a friend on Christmas Eve, and then me and my husband hung out. We went for a drive on Christmas Day. We were supposed to be Pokemon hunting, but then we decided to go on a random drive, and it was kind of nice. We came back, we snuggled with the cat,
Oh,
watched some TV, and yeah, that was it. So
that sounds
can't
lovely.
complain. Yeah, it
And
really was. Got to do a little baking too. Got to make some flan for my husband, so he was really appreciative of that.
girl, how about you also, if you're into like sending baked goods, feel free to send me a tiramisu and or any experimental goods. Send it up to, Yankee Town up here, and I'd be happy to test these out and
Oh, I
give you
got
a
you, boo.
heartfelt thanks and critique. I
Well,
love a
I
baked
got
good.
you.
Thank you.
Well, so do I. I mean, that's why I have, my lovely figure is because I eat too many baked goods. But anyways.
You and I both.
But speaking of lovely figures, we are going to be going into chapter 2 of Tears on a Withered Flower. So this particular episode starts out with us seeing Hey Sue. She's working at the flower shop. It looks like she's, clipping some stems off some roses. And I will say that she has a very lovely figure from behind. I really
Mhm.
wish I had a behind like her. Um, and I know a lot of people like have been hating on the way Jesus was drawn, but honestly, like I really love like how she's drawn. She's I mean, obviously she's attractive, cuz I mean, would anybody really read a manhwa about an ugly person? And I hate to put it that way, but
Sometimes they do, but I think, when we talk about like just bodies, I do feel like it's commonplace or in vogue to like give flack about her body. But to be honest, being a like avid reader that I am, I've seen such exaggerated like body types
Mhm.
in all different types of genre, including josei and webtoons themselves, that I'm really shocked that people have made it a point to bullet point what they hate about her body, and I don't think they necessarily get it right. It
Yeah.
sounds very like everyone's just repeating what they heard someone else say.
Yep.
Um, just about like her, like the size of her bust, as if busty petite busty girls exist.
Yes,
Uh,
they do. Mhm.
petite busty girls exist. I don't know who told people that they don't. And then they're like, it's because girls don't look like that in Korea. And I was like, nobody looks like there's barely anyone in this story that looks like they're really from Korea.
I
Like
mean,
there's
you're
a
not wrong.
like in there, not only that, but like let's be real here. The comics, manga, manhwa industry, it's fantasy. And a
It
lot of
really
the
is.
ways that characters are depicted, whether it be the length of their legs, the size of their eyes, the impossible disparity between the height of the men and the height of the women. There's a level of
Mhm.
exaggeration that goes into the style that a manhwa artist, a webtoon artist, a manga artist uses that you need to recognize as the signature of the work and not harp on real reality because this isn't wasn't made to be a hyper realistic depiction of the human anatomy in any way. And I really don't see anything wrong with her body. And to be honest with you, I actually went to school with women that to all girl public school. I went to school with women who had this body type, long legs, slim profile, bubble butts, and big tatas. What's the big deal? I don't get it. It's like she's
Yeah,
not
I don't
even like.
really either. I mean, I'll be honest, like I used to collect comic books. I used to read like a lot of X-Men, Gen 13, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of like Image titles, Marvel, a little bit of DC like here and there. And I will tell you that if you want to harp on people about proportions, you need to also talk about American comic book artists because they are just as guilty. And if anyone has ever read any kind of issue of heavy metal, it's the same thing.
Yes.
You have these like robust women, in chainmail bikinis, running around and it's like, yeah, that's what sells, unfortunately. But the thing is that if you were to draw to regular proportions, it wouldn't look as good. So and I'm all for like realism, but it's like, come on, let's give some grace. Like Gainem is like like she is just an amazing artist. Um, and I don't get it, but
I enjoy
um,
the art style, to be honest with you. I
yeah,
don't
me
get it
too.
either. And I don't endorse the criticism. Like everybody's entitled to their own opinion about things. What I dislike when people have like they it's like an echo chamber where everyone's repeating the same thing and I was like you like verbatim repeating the same thing and it's like all right, it could be valid if it wasn't if the information that's being communicated wasn't correct, right? Like and we'll talk about it even more as we go along, and then I'm gonna like put a pin in it because of course, for us, this is a reread. For the listeners out here, it is could be your very first time learning about chapter two, but I'm going just keep an eye out and the ear out because I'm going to pinpoint something that actually goes into why people think that her body's unrealistic for this chapter. So I'm putting it out
Yeah.
there.
Well, as I said before, we get the opening of this episode with her like, clipping the ends of the flowers for our male lead, and then we get some insight from her inner dialogue. So she says some people live in the spotlight like the main character from a novel or a movie, while others stay in the shadows like nameless extras no one cares about. And what really like gets me about this little bit of her inner monologue is that when she's talking about how some people like live in a spotlight, we get these images of like a guy with like a guy like leaning against like this fancy car, and like some attractive like faceless woman like wearing nice clothes, and there's all these like bling and like clothes and jewelry, mixed in with all this
Yeah.
imagery. And then she's like, talking about how they are the main character. And then the next panel, it's just her, just walking, nothing in the background. And then that's when she says, while others stay in the shadows, like nameless extras no one cares about. And then, like, the next couple panels, like, we see her glancing back at him. Teha's just sitting there with them long ass legs staring at his phone. And then the next panel says, clearly the rose guy, quote unquote, belonged to the former group, unlike me. And, and at this point, it almost feels like she doesn't feel like she's even a main character, in her own life, which that makes me really sad. You know,
Yeah.
I hate
Def
that for her.
I hate it for her too. I think her self-imagery, like her image of herself, her self-esteem in this chapter. And I mean, we get the hint of how her self-esteem may have been impacted by the relationships she's in the in chapter 1. But she really does have the mentality that she's just an NPC going about her life. Um and she's not the main character in her life, unfortunately, which is,
Yeah.
as you said, heartbreaking to see.
It really is because I mean, unfortunately, like, a lot of like our self-worth comes from how others see us. And even though people are like, "Oh, you shouldn't worry about what other people say, blah 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 blah." Well, it's easy to say, but it's not so easy to do. And especially when
Mhm.
when you might be in a situation, where you don't you're not able to get like acceptance as easily because you're afraid to speak out. And we kind of saw from the first chapter, how Minchol, her current husband or whatever he is, how he talks to her and how he views her. And how and like my question would be like how would you expect a woman like that who lives in that kind of environment, how could you expect her to not see the worth in herself? You know? And I hate it. I hate it that other people have made her feel that way. And I wish I could give her like a warm chocolate chip cookie and a hug because, girl, you don't need that.
I agree with you. I think that even if you have the like confidence big enough to like fortify you like Fort Knox, um, constantly like this isn't something that where she's getting like verbal abuse from random customers. She can like go away and she may never see them again. When she goes home, the kind of discourse that she has with her partner is very, very toxic. And over time, regardless of how strong you are as a person, how strong your sense of self worth is, um, like negative conversations, negative dialogue, accusations, verbal abuse can wear you way down. And I
Oh,
think,
yes.
I mean, even with the color design for Nahesu, she's in very muted colors, tan beige, gray washed out jeans, um, nondescript, non-designer clothes. Like you like the way that she's drawn is almost like colorless, although to be honest with you, she's actually a beautiful woman. She's
Mhm.
drawn in such a way that you don't see any vibrance in her persona. And like when you're dealing with a toxic relationship, it can really suck the light in life out of you to the point where you become a washed out version of yourself and then come to view yourself that way until
Oh, definitely.
and it's unfortunate to say and unfortunate to see. And unfortunately, we're gonna see more of it. Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I will say that like, I like many of you out there, have had some, struggles with mental health. And I will say that at one point, like I had some very toxic like inner dialogue with myself. And I don't even know where it started. I don't even know why it started. That's the thing about like depression and anxiety, it just makes you think things that you normally would not think. And I will say that I did not realize like how bad like my inner dialogue was until I went to a therapist and she pointed it out. And and also my best friend, hi Jess, um, also told me like when I told her the things I was telling myself, she was like, would you ever say that to someone? I was like, "No." She's like, "Then why are you saying it to yourself?" You know,
Amen.
so this so this just goes to show that yeah, you're 100% correct. And sometimes it doesn't have to be like other people. It can also be, coming from within. And especially since, she's not really getting much positive energy in, so I can only imagine the energy that she has inside is probably negative and tapped out, just like you said. Like I feel like, she comes across as like emotionally distant. And I mean, throughout the story we'll understand why, But I hate that she doesn't think she's a main character in her own life. I really hate that. And then
I
you have Broseph over here, just sitting there staring at his phone. But like, I don't know, like he looks very well put together. He's just, kind of sitting there and then she glances over at him and she's like, "Yeah, clearly the rose guy belonged to the former group. Um unlike me, you know."
Yeah. And when you see someone doing well, you can't help but to compare yourself to that, like, when you're self-reflecting. And I get the sense from chapter 2 that she's a very introverted person and
Oh,
much to
very.
herself. Um, but, like, snapping out of that, like, negative spiral of a spell, she calls the rose guy over to give him the bouquet. Basically tells him, "Here's the bouquet you ordered." She doesn't look up at him, but she's still thinking in her thought, like she still has this cycle of negative thoughts where she says, you know, she's not a main character. She is someone who had always been a nobody. Maybe that was why he left such a deep impression on me. Seeing somebody who looks vibrant, filled with life, and like clearly you like she can sense that there is a difference in status and lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
Of that, like she's differentiating herself from this man in such a negative way. And then there's a picture of him reaching out to grab the bouquet of roses that she made for him. And then it pans to a picture of her just staring at him while he's holding the bouquet. And the sun is just shining on him. And she's still thinking to herself, "He left a deep impression on her during a time when I couldn't afford to care about anything aside from work and my husband." So, like, he literally kind of, with just an interaction, wiggled his way into her mind and left an impression. And I mean, I get it. He's hot, like, and he's covered now, like, in sunshine and rainbows. So I'm pretty sure I would be impressed by seeing a man of that caliber coming in buying a bouquet of roses. That's ultra romantic. Even if it's not like, I don't know who it's for, I don't know why he's buying it. Maybe he's a rose fanatic, but I would just think, look at that man coming in buying roses. Who are those roses for? He's so, well, it's a level of affluent enough to be able to buy something that's a luxury item. What's he
Yeah.
got going? I would wonder, like, just because I'm nosy.
Oh, I would too. And can we just talk a moment about the direct eye contact he's giving
Yep,
her in that panel? I mean,
absolutely.
I will say there are so many things that I love about this panel. Like, I really like how the characters are more at the forefront and then everything else is, not blurred, but it's definitely more subtle than, the two people in the forefront. And I love how like she's just standing there and he's just looking straight at her and then you have like this kind of like this flare effect on the side where on the arm where he's holding the roses, like it just, I don't
Mhm.
know, like it just radiates. And then with the lightness of the background, I mean, there's so many things that I like about it and my art nerd self is just enjoying, the colors and the composition, and I digress off my nerd soapbox, but it's just lovely to look at. Like I would love a poster of this actually.
Yeah, me too. I think it's just that particular scene where it's like iridescent colors like radiating off of him and actually touching Nahesu.
Mhm.
Just,
Mhm.
I think this is like the visualization of the impact that he's having in that moment. And that eye contact is, he's looking at like he is looking at this woman. We
Yeah,
don't know
that's an
why.
intense look though. Like
Yes.
it radiates intensity, or at least to me it does.
Mind you, as she said, she doesn't have it usually she doesn't have anything in her mind other than work and her husband. And then let us pan, because we get some dialogue from our coworker who's basically like gushing over the roast guy. Oh my gosh. Did you see how he asked you to take his order when I was standing right there? And then, side note, it was like he didn't even notice me. Okay, hear me out. I think you're the reason he keeps coming here. So that's our coworker, like gushing about this man and the fact that he comes into the flower shop and she thinks that he's coming in for Jesus. And she goes on to say, he only by on weekday mornings when you're working. And he never said a single word to me or the owner. And Jesus like at the counter talking to a coworker. She's looking kind of like confused. She's she looks and the coworker goes on to say like he comes in during the time that she works because she works weekday mornings, and he never speaks to the owner. It never speaks to the coworker, only speaks to Jesus. And Jesus has the nerve to say, "But I've never seen him before." And the coworker, this is hilarious. It's a hilarious panel. Coworker's like, "What?" Like she exclaims, "What?" And she's like, "You can't be serious. Like he's buying flowers from us every single day for months. How could you not notice a hottie like that?" Really? And then Jesus in her mind's like, really? Every single day? You can see that she's basically thinking back, like, I've never seen him. Months. And he only speaks to me? Like oh my gosh, that signifies how out of it she is, like just working through the
Yeah,
paces. Cause he's a
definitely.
noticeable man. Like six
But you
foot
know
plus
what
tall
though?
man.
I feel like that kind of speaks to her character. Like, because I feel like she's the type where she comes in, she clocks in, she's ready to go. And we've seen that, like, from the first, like, chapter, right? Because she was even telling, like, her coworker, who we like to call Ponytail Girl, she's
Mhm.
telling her to, hey, get ready to do, open up, we gotta do stuff. And she's like, oh, but blah, blah, blah. Like, because we know Ponytail Girl likes to talk, but can I just say real quickly, I really kind of like the nice nasty comment she said when she was like, it was like he didn't even notice me.
Mhm. Oh, it wasn't like he didn't even notice you. He literally looked you in your face
Mhm.
and then walked over to Jesus in chapter 1 and just
Yep.
asked her to
Yep.
take his order. Like he knew you were there. He just
He's just not that into you.
he did not want to he did not acknowledge her. He just went
Mm-mm.
about his routine apparently that's been going on for months. Every day she works.
Mhm.
And this is the first time apparently that she's noticing, which is crazy.
It
Yeah.
is, but kind of on brand for her, I'd say, because, like I said, I think she's the type that, like, when she gets to work, she's there to work. She's not really there,
To
to be
socialize.
BFF. She's not there, yeah. And that's something, that we will kind of see, like, in the series, and I also think that a lot of that probably has to do with, the way she views, like, relationships or the lack of views of relationships, because as far as we know, she doesn't really have anyone that she really hangs out with, and I would say that when you get to a certain point in life, when you get to a certain age, most of your friends or most of the people that you meet are probably going to be from work.
Yeah, you spend a lot of time there. You either
Exactly.
forge relationships, although you don't necessarily have to. It's not a necessity. It just makes it easier to get by. Um, in my former life, I worked in the hospitality industry, and it was of the utmost importance that if you notice like regular customers though, because
Oh,
then
definitely.
you
Mhm.
could give that premium customer service because you actually like remember them, remember what they order, and you treat them with the level of like respect because they're repeat patrons. So for me, it's like the fact that she doesn't recognize like people. She considers herself an NPC, right? But people around her, despite the fact that they even they're frequent like customers, so they just a blur in the background as she goes through the paces. Pretty concerning because you don't even have any facial recognition right now for humans outside of your direct sphere of relationships. Like,
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
obviously she knows who her coworkers are. That's a necessity. But customers, like frequent customers, could make make or break. Like working as a bartender and a server, that could make or break your tip if you don't know these people. But at the same time, I guess you're just trying to get through the day. You got to do what you got to do. Um,
Yeah, especially when you work as many jobs as she does because she works there and like during the daytime and then at night she's at the barbecue restaurant,
yeah,
and I can imagine like how like mentally exhausting that's got to be because I've not been a server, but I have worked in the food service industry. I've also worked customer service and like one job that I had required me to travel because the company that I work for would put on conventions, for their customers. And like let me tell you, I like whenever I would go to the convention because I would have to work it. I was like on like 12 hours a day,
oh,
which means you get corporate auntie for 12 hours because, you know, you just have to be on because even though you're technically off the clock, you're not really because you're still running into like customers that you talk to on the phone like all the time.
yep,
So even if they see you after hours, you still have to be corporate. So and that gets really exhausting and I'm one of those type of people where I can only do so much socializing and then I need alone time. It's like my social battery needs to be recharged. And after a few of those conventions, I stopped really hanging out with people after hours just cuz I was tired and I needed to charge my social battery. And I would be working as a cashier because we also sold products. And if I was a cashier, I would always have a very long line because there were people that wanted to talk to me.
oh,
Which I was very flattered, and it made me feel really nice because people would be offered to go to another line that was way shorter, but no, they wanted to talk with Auntie, and I was like, "Oh, look at me," you know. But at the same time, it is very mentally exhausting, So I can
absolutely.
only imagine like how exhausting it's got to be for her with working like two jobs and then having to remember all of the regulars and honestly, it wouldn't surprise me, because she seems like she's always in the back, like doing stuff. She's not really looking up, and that's pretty typical for people in retail. Like, if you ever go to the grocery store, like, usually the cashier that's checking you out, like, they very rarely look at you in the face. And that's not me trying to diss anybody. It's just they're there to do their job. They're being pleasant. Hey, how you doing? Paper, plastic, okay, thanks, bye. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what like that's the vibe I'm kind of getting from her, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like everybody can't be a sparkling superstar like, the main characters. There's got to be some drones, and she considers herself a drone, and she acts that way too. But what's really funny, I think, is that despite the fact that she doesn't make those connections with customers, like she knows how to do her job down to a T, because, like digging into the story, she reflected like that she remembers making the same bouquet for someone every morning, but
Mhm.
remembering that person's face. So even like on autopilot, she's still making sure that the job gets done. She just doesn't make those connections with clients and customers, which is fine because she, as long as the job is getting done and she's respectful, which she is,
Yeah.
might be
And I mean, some
distant,
people
but
are just
respectful.
yeah. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's not like she's dealing, with some like high class clientele, like like if this was like a Coach store or like Gucci or something like that, I mean, I'd be like, yeah, girl, you need to kind of up your game. But
And I'm
we're just
pretty
talking
sure that
about
she know how to
flowers.
do it. Just
Oh yeah,
flowers, maybe
totally. Yeah, it's just flowers. But what's really interesting is like, after we get through like that panel where she's finally realizing, oh, really? Every single day? And then, she's like, oh yeah, now that I think about it. And then like the next panel, it's like her and Ponytail Girl like just standing at the counter, and then Ponytail Girl's like, I mean, I guess you're way too busy to remember a single customer. But come on, isn't it normal to remember guys who are that hot? Personally, I still remember this one really hot guy I saw on the subway 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's totally into you. And, like, girl, why would you still remember a guy on the subway 10 years ago?
Sometimes people are that hot, I guess. I personally wouldn't remember it, but if you're not accustomed if you're accustomed to seeing squid face guys and you see somebody hot, it makes an impression sometimes. Not all the time though.
Yeah, I guess so. You always remember your first crush, I guess, but I don't know. I was just like, wow, that's random.
Yeah, my question would be, she looks pretty her coworker looks pretty young. How old was she 10 years ago on the subway? Girlfriend couldn't have been more than, like, 9 or 10. Don't like, but
Yeah.
I digress because she seems pretty young, um,
Yeah,
based
she
off
does. Like,
her
yeah,
character,
no, I
like,
agree.
style.
Mhm, mhm. She looks like a college student or something,
Yeah,
and because of her, like, attitude, that's, because she comes across as very, very immature. So yeah, I agree. I think she's gotta be, like, early 20s, maybe, at
yeah.
least, like, 19 or 20.
Very casual,
Mhm.
enthusiastic, but very verbose and, like, overly familiar.
Yeah, definitely. And
'Cause
you can tell
girl
that Jesus was just kind of tolerating it.
yeah, like, when she's like, "He's totally into you," she looks at her coworker like she's a little crazy, and she's, like, kinda, like, taken aback because she's just like, "I'm just doing a job. I'm not razzle dazzling it for the customer." She looks very confused,
Yeah.
in the panel when it pans in on her reaction. And, like, she's like, "Don't be" she tells her coworker, "Don't be silly. Let's get back to work." And of course, because, the young, we got the Gen Z, I guess. She's like, "I'm being serious. He was staring at you the entire time he was here." And going back to what you said about that one shot of him holding the bouquet, looking down at her while we can only see her back, and he's, like, giving that intense eye contact. She's not wrong.
Mm-mm.
She's
Yeah, she
not
definitely
wrong.
isn't.
But, homegirl doesn't we've already established that she sees herself as an NPC, so she's just like, "You gotta be out of your mind," right? Like, it's kinda funny.
Yeah, it really is. But I think that kind of like speaks to like everybody who, has been told, "Oh, so and so likes you." And it's like, "Nah, they don't like me." And it's more because, I know for me, I don't want to get an ego. So I just kind of like brush it off cuz I'm the type where it's like, trust but verify. I don't take things at face value. Not necessarily. Like, if you tell me, "Oh, I have $1,000,000," I'll be like, "Oh, okay." Am I gonna believe you? Not necessarily, but you do you. You know what I mean? So sometimes I feel like, when people get like that, it's like you can see like Jesus kind of like smiling a little bit as she's saying, "Don't be silly, let's get back to work." So you can tell she, feels a little bit flattered. And you got like a young broseph there who's like super tall, he looks good and probably smells amazing. My headcanon says he smells like expensive, good cologne, and
Yeah.
nobody can tell me nothing else. um,
Yes, I can see it. I can
yes,
hear it. I can smell it. Like,
yes.
a old guy walks by and he, like, looks well put together and smells great. It's, like, the best sensation ever.
Oh my gosh, yes. That's like insta attraction.
Indeed, it's true. Can't even lie. But, like, even like, even with the impression that the rose guy gave her, that impact, she basically said, like, she was really looking at him because she says he must have been like at least 10 years younger than me. So he's practically a kid. Why would he have a crush on an old lady like me? And then her coworker responds in the background, no, no, nowadays a lot of young guys go for older women. Um, that's a thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'll tell you, like, I play a lot of World of Warcraft, and, like, I've had, like, some youngins flirt with me, and I'm like, well, just so you know, I'm, like, 48. And they're like, oh, that's okay. Like, I had one guy ask me for, like, nude pics. I'm like, nah, man, we ain't going there.
The
Um,
audacity.
yeah, it was really, well, what was even funnier is my husband was sitting on his computer beside me, and I was telling him all of this, and he's reading this chat, and he's just like shaking his head.
That's crazy. Like, people on the internet, they're wild.
Yeah, they
Um,
really are.
I
Um,
mean, if young guys didn't go for older women, there would be no such thing as the term pumas and cougars. So, it is a thing.
yeah. It
Uh,
definitely is, and I'm like, "You know what? As long as it's consensual on both sides, you go, do what you do, live your bliss, you know?" Um, I mean, I know that me and, Madam Void once had a conversation about dating younger men, because there was somebody that was on the server that used to flirt with us a lot, and we knew it was all in good fun, but, she was like, I wouldn't wanna date a younger man just because, it's like you have to teach them things and you have to, it's almost like training a puppy. I'm like, "Yeah, you're kinda not wrong on
yeah,
that."
from housebreaking and all. Um,
Yeah. Sorry,
I'm not gonna
guys.
I'm not gonna put my personal business in the streets. Been there, done that. Did not get the souvenir T-shirt. Do not recommend. Highly suggest you take a break before you drop the
Yeah.
cradle.
Yeah. I mean, my husband is about a year younger than me, and he likes to call me a cougar, and I'm like, "Okay, well,
Each
I guess
his
you're into
own. Like,
grannies."
there's some, very well put together, mature people out there who can handle mature relationships. There are also not well put together, older men who can't handle a mature relationship. Yeah, it's the luck of the draw with what you get.
Yeah,
It's
it
kind of
really is.
like a mystery ball when you're playing a gotcha game. You're gonna get something that pops out. It could be great, or it could be absolutely disappointing. And you know what? I don't think it's
I
not
mean,
limited to younger guys or older. It just is what
nah.
it
I
is.
mean, yeah, it really is. I mean, it just depends on the individuals, but,
Yeah.
like I said, as long as everything's consensual, you know where you stand, you know, I mean, I'm all for you living your bliss, and as long as everything is legal and they're over 18 and,
Oh
they
dear.
are of sound mind, I mean, I don't necessarily get it. I guess I could, but, that's a conversation for another day. But
Indeed.
yeah.
Well, let's get it back into the story. The coworker says, she's in a mood to like push the topic to Jesus a bit. She just says, "What makes you think he's not interested in you?" And then it pans to a picture of the profile of the rose guy, and he's looking at the bouquet of roses, like potentially smelling them, and then coworker goes on to say, "I mean, you're beautiful, and it shows the rose guy looking down, smiling subtly at the bouquet, and there's that iridescent kind of like dust mody like filter on both of those where it's like it focuses in on him, and you could tell that something's afoot. Like, we can't tell if it's because he likes her or he's just happy to have roses, but it pans in on him when the coworker is talking about the fact that Jesus is pretty, and how does she not like? Is she a? How can she tell whether this guy likes her or not? And Jesus responds, right, yeah, like real sarcastic. Be in another lifetime, and like she's back to business, back to work, making another bouquet. 'Cause it is working hours and there's stuff that needs to be done. And the coworker's still running her mouth. And she's like, "Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Hasn't anyone ever told you that?" And we get a flashback to chapter 1 where her coworker at the Korean barbecue spot, was joking around with her at the end of the night and had called her pretty. And, Jesus thinking, my coworker did tell me I was pretty, but it was more embarrassing than anything else. And she's like reflecting on it. She's making the roses, well, not roses actually, just bouquet of flowers. And she's reflecting internally, and at this point, like she kind of zones out her coworker, and she's thinking because I knew she was just trying to make me feel better, and she calls herself an old withered flower. So we get this mentality of this woman who doesn't think she's pretty. She thinks she's a a NPC that's in the background, a nobody. She also like she thinks she's an old withered flower. Like her outlook on like her sense of self worth. I know we said it
Ugh,
before, but we're getting more into the weeds on how she feels about herself.
yeah. We really are. I mean, I hate the fact that she thinks herself as a withered flower, because I will say that as a woman who is about to turn 49, in a couple of months, I mean, it does kind of hit you at some point that it's like, oh, I'm older. Are people just giving me compliments to make me feel better? Because I mean, those things do go through your mind, but I feel like she's not that old. And like looks wise, she doesn't look withered, but obviously we're talking, it's probably more on the inside where she's withered.
Absolutely.
And I hate that. I mean, it's so crappy that like women are made to feel this way at a certain age. And I mean, I'm not saying it's exclusive to women because I'm sure like men, can probably relate to a degree. But in the context of this comic, we're probably going to be talking more about the female side of things. So, for the risk of sounding woke, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Um,
The thing is, it's like when it comes to women, even now, we're in, 2026, and discourse around women goes into, oh, well, you're not getting any younger. You're,
mhm.
the best years of your life are
Biological
your
clock is ticking,
the
when
best
are
years of
you?
your life is the
Mhm.
20s, and like fulfill this whole like archaic stereotypical women are better younger, and as they age then they like no longer their
Have
value would
worth.
decrease.
Yeah.
Yeah, which unfortunately in this particular third being in your 30s is not the end of the world. But even discourse online, and I spend time on social media, and as you like as time goes on, you end up being exposed to people younger and younger that you might not hang around, but they're to them the idea that anybody was born in the 1900s is enough to send them into a spiral, like we saw dinosaurs or something.
I
Like,
know.
which is crazy to me. And they're like, "Oh, why are you online?" Like that. I myself am not in my 30s. I'm actually, approaching my mid 40s, and I'm a millennial kid who actually grew up with the internet, like literally, like social media and things that people know as Meta and freaking Twitter and X or whatever they call it nowadays. I grew up with that, so it's like I was here before you. Like you know nothing of my ways. Like
Yeah, I
like
was gonna
literally.
say. Because like I'm Gen X. I'm at the tail end of Gen X, right? So we didn't have internet like when we were kids, and I'm not trying to make this a back in my day, but we didn't have the internet. Like the we I didn't get on the internet until I was like 19 or maybe in my like 19 or 20. And that was like around 1996 or 97, like somewhere around there. That was like my first interaction with email. My first time being online. I mean, we had like IRC, but anyways, the point I guess we're trying to make is that, you know, it it sucks that so much pressure is being put on you as a young woman, and it's almost like you're not allowed to age. You're not allowed to get old, you're not allowed to get fat, you're not allowed to get wrinkles, you're not allowed to get gray hair. Your worth is less if you don't have children. There's all this societal pressure that's coming down on you, right? And then combine that with a verbally abusive spouse. It's no wonder that this woman feels like she's old and withered up, you know?
Absolutely. The idea, like, I don't know who to blame for this. I'm gonna blame capitalism at this point because it is what it is. The idea that the value of a person depreciates over time is absolutely a disgusting way to think about someone's worth when
It
you're reflecting
really
it off.
is.
And it can be like misogyny and other elements, like I said, verbal abuse can really wear down someone's self-worth that they measure themselves against how they're viewed. And for a woman like Jesus who works hard and, clearly, like, even, like, the way that she speaks to people is with respect and kindness, to have herself worn down so far that she doesn't feel even beautiful when it's clear that she is, says more about society as the pressures that she faces more than just being like, "Oh, she just has low self-esteem." Like, there's a reason, and of course, like, as time goes on, we've gotten to see at least one reason why she thinks the way she does.
Yep.
Um, I'm pretty sure that there'll be more. I think it's kinda sad, and, like, her thoughts in this particular chapter have been particularly morose,
Yeah, they really
unfortunately,
have.
but it
Mhm.
gives you a view into, like, what headspace she's currently in this point in the story where we're meeting her for the very first time.
Yeah.
Um,
And what's interesting to me, just to piggyback off of what you said real quick, we always talk about like the color palette, and like even though like it's a bright day, we're in the middle of the day, like even if you look at the colors, they are super muted. And I feel
yep,
like this kind of reflects her mood and her like mental state. Like she's just there, she's there to do her job. It's almost like life has lost its luster, and that's why things don't look vibrant, or lively. We don't even get the like lens flare and the specs in this, even though there's probably a win. She's probably close to or maybe even facing a window, but we don't
she
get
is.
that.
We
You know, we
don't.
don't we don't get that. We just get like a slight little line where her hair is, where there might be a reflection of light, but other than that, there's like no vibrancy. And I think, that speaks to a lot of the tone that is being set for this story. Um,
Yeah, and
I
the
hate
still
that.
like I know, but the stark contrast when the rose guy enters the picture, like, he's wearing black for the most part, so he stands out in this muted world where it's not like he's wearing, like, vibrant colors, but it's a stark contrast to her washed out color palette, and then
Hmm.
he picks one of the, like, the most vibrant colors in this particular chapter, which is deep red, blood red
Hmm.
roses, right? So, even his request and how he's depicted and how she sees him, and then like the dust motes and the iridescent like sparkles around him when he's
Hmm.
around, they disappear, and then you go back to like regular washed out Hey Sue, who's, mulling over her life. And one of the things is like we get so much inner dialogue from her, just mulling
Mhm.
over herself, her self-worth, her like self-reflection. And
It's
she's placing him, this man that she's seen that made that deep impact back into the like back closets of her brain.
yeah. I mean, what really bothers me is like the next bit of dialogue that we get.
Yeah.
So it goes on to say, in a way, it was ironic that the only person who ever complimented me was my coworker and not the man I married. My beautiful flowers, can I tell you how this triggers me a little bit? What really gets the point across with this bit of dialogue is that the first part, where she talks about the only person that complimented me, the next panel is her holding a flower and she's ripping off a leaf because, she's probably making another arrangement. So it's like she's picking off a leaf and then not the man I married. So I feel like there is a lot of symbolism here, and maybe it's again the
Mhm.
art nerd brain of mine, but I feel like this is like a specific conscious choice, or maybe it's just me reading into things. But I think it's very interesting that we see that she's actually picking off things from this flower as she's thinking about this. Like maybe it's representative of like her self being picked apart, by her husband since he has not given her a kind word or even complimented her, and I just again, it just put the knife in a little bit more, Gaten. Just slide it in a little bit more.
Yeah. It you if you thought the relationship between her and her husband Minchol was toxic, now you know he doesn't call her beautiful. And I mean, in the first chapter, he's talking about her the fact that she doesn't wear makeup and she looks washed
Mhm.
out. And he's like, women who just work a part time job
Part-time job,
for chump
can afford
change.
makeup. Yeah.
Exactly. And she's worried about spending a single dollar while Willis he drinks himself into a stupor in the house. Um Yeah, there's so much symbolism around the panel where we only see her hands ripping away, stripping the flower of its leaves and down to
Mhm.
the stem, which can be symbolic of her relationship with Minchal and how he strips her as a flower. Like eventually, those flowers in that bouquet that she's making are going to die. They're not going to live,
Exactly.
and and the relationships that she's in, she considers herself withered, and harsh words and harsh life can strip away what makes it like helps you live. To be honest with you, strips it away, leaves you lifeless, and in the end, could stress. It, poverty itself can kill you.
Oh,
That
definitely.
much.
I mean, honestly, to like take this analogy even further, like if you take the leaves off of a flower, like let's say you have a flower that's like in a garden, I'm sure that if you take the leaves off, it'll make it that much more difficult for the flower to grow, because
Yep.
that's how, I mean, yeah, you have the roots, but then, like the leaves are like getting sunlight and photosynthesis. And I'm not a scientist, so please be kind to Auntie. But my point is that the more you strip away, at a plant, the harder it is for that plant to thrive, and we are seeing that here. And I just hate that we have to talk about this because, you know, it's just a shame that people feel that way about themselves, and I hate
Mm.
it. I've been in dark places, and I'm sure we all have, and we know how hard it is once you get on that carousel of dark thought. It is really hard to get off that carousel or make it stop. And that's,
Yeah.
but I will say that like this right here is very brilliantly done. And I'll be honest, like I didn't really pick up on this until I did the reread just before we started recording.
The
Well
symbolism
done.
behind that, the
Yeah.
panning on her stripping away the leaves. Yeah, it's sad all around. Um, there's a lot of symbolic imagery in this particular story that it's a pleasure to be able to break down with you. You know. Um,
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, honestly, like I know, some, folks like to do like batches, but honestly, like Digital Girl and I chose to do episode by episode just because when we did the first episode, we picked up so many things that we didn't really get to the first time. And I think by breaking everything down, it just adds that much more complexity and like layers to the story. So I'm all about it. I mean, I'm here for y'all.
yes,
I'm here for it. I'm all
and I
about
hope
it.
and I hope they either our listeners are here for it too. Um, so going back into the story because I mean I feel bad for Jesus. She's already in a different kind of mood. Kind of like her reflection is very it's a trending negatively, and then she
Yes.
has her coworker still badgering her about this regular customer who comes and buys roses, and her coworker goes on to say, after she reflects that she's, no one calls her beautiful other than her coworkers because both the coworker at the flower shop and the coworker at the Korean barbecue at this point called her beautiful or pretty. But now her coworker's, still yammering on talking about, come on, just give him a chance. You two would make a cute couple. And at that point, Jesus basically, shuts down this whole conversation by saying, I'm taken. Um, and, the nosy coworker is like, huh? And then she's shocked and she's like, actually, and Jesus responds, yes. And the coworker says, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? And Jesus doesn't really say anything at that point, and I get why she wouldn't have said anything because she's not in the best state with her husband. But the
Yeah.
coworker is just, yammering on still. And it's like, oh wow, this feels like such a plot twist. And then you can hear out to the side, like, I mean, I guess it makes sense. I figured you were really popular. And Jesus at the time is still like stripping the stems of the flowers of their leaves for the flower arrangements that she's making. While our coworker's just still, going on and on and on about her relationship and kind of forcing Jesus to put a end to it by like revealing personal information, which goes to show that Jesus not really that type to give all of her business, but in this case, she's
Yes.
kind of trying to stop the coworker from getting carried away. She's just like, this man is not interested in me. Why are you pushing him at me? He's not. You're just exaggerating, basically, and I am taken. So she's drawing the line with her coworker so that she doesn't continue to yammer on and try to play matchmaker, which would be embarrassing, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, but even like if you look at what she says, it's like, "Oh wow, this feels like such a plot twist." Like, girl, this is not a like M. Night Shyamalan like movie. This is somebody's
No, it's
real
not
life. Like, why are you so fucking nosy? Like, come on. Like
nosy
why
and
would she
intrusive.
yeah, like she has no reason to tell you anything. Like I get you guys like work together, so of course, there's a certain amount of, you know, stuff that you share, but like her coworker reminds me of like people that I've worked with before, that are like oversharers, and
Mhm.
I've met a lot of them, like boyfriends are in jail and plans when they get out, and I'm just like, I don't want to know. I just want to train you so you can do your job. But I have to hear about the jailbird boyfriend. And so I can really relate to Jesus because you can see when she's like getting these flowers ready, like her field of F's are barren and she just does not care what Ponytail Girl has to say. Um, and then she's like, I mean, I guess it makes sense. I figured you were really popular. Like, what does that have to do with being married? But,
Uh,
anyways,
or like I think
uh,
honestly, she got to the point where she was basically zoning out the coworker again and going back into regular work mode because,
And I can't say
like,
that I blame her.
yeah, there's a lot of like there's stuff to do. Like there's a job to be done, and then
Mhm.
there's the nosy coworker can't help herself. She asks the one question. So what's he what is he like? And we're talking about the husband that she has, and then it pans over
Ah,
to home. So, like Ace was off from work and Minchall just got off from work and he announces that he's home. And the first thing, in like Japanese and Korean households, there's an area at the front door where usually, even if it's very small, where it's expected that you're going to take your shoes off, probably put your shoes in a shoe cabinet that's usually right beside the door. Um, I don't know what the term is called in Korean, but I do know in Japanese it's called a genkan. So people like don't wear their shoes in the house, and he takes off his shoes, and then the next thing that he does is toss his suitcase, his work bag, right onto the floor. And as per usual, Minchal comes into the room and Heiso is there, so she goes and she picks up his work bag and he's removing his clothes as he's talking. He's talking about working. He's like, ugh, I'm exhausted. Give me something to drink. You got any tea? And, like Heisu is now in loungewear and she's picking up the bag. She responds, I have some barley tea, but it's still warm. And he basically tells her, throw some ice in there. Now, this like they're married, right? He walks through the door, immediately starts complaining, throwing his items of like his work items, stripping as he's walking around, like literally tossing his items of clothing on the floor.
yeah.
And then he says, I'm taking a shower. He like takes off his shirt. Then we pan to a close up of Jesus continuing to pick up all the things that he's just throwing onto the ground. Mind you, they do have a hamper. That is something that they have. Instead of putting it in there, he actually didn't really greet Jesus. He didn't say, he just said, he announces he's home, starts stripping his clothes off, goes to take a shower, throws everything on the floor. I have so many thoughts about this. One of the is the audacity and the disrespect because this is you
Mhm.
know, and we know as the readers that she came home after working in the morning at the flower shop, to greet him. He's not really greeting her. He doesn't say, "Hey, how's your day?" He doesn't give her a kiss on the cheek. He literally just comes in and starts stripping and
Dropping trowel.
dropping trowel, throwing his dirty boxers on the floor, his socks, everything's thrown on the ground without missing a beat, demanding something to drink.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this triggers me so bad, because it's like, it's one thing to like strip, right? Because I'll be honest, like my dad used to do that, but for context, he's a farmer. So he would be working outside. He works around a lot of chemicals. So, of course, he's not going to want to give my mom a hug or a kiss because he's covered in dirt and God knows what, but
Mhm.
he will at least say, "Hey, honey, I'm home." Or he'll at least acknowledge us because usually by the time he got home, we were already eating because we were younger and kids they can't wait till like 7:30, 8 o'clock to eat. So
Right.
so I'm willing to give a little bit of grace, but for fucker McGee here, like it's just his attitude. Like it's not like he's covered in dirt, but I get it. The first thing you want to do when you come home is get comfortable. And my beautiful flowers, let me tell you, I work remote now, but when I used to work at the office and come home, one of the first things I would do is let my girls go free, and all of our female members, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You take that bra off for the first time, and it is just the most amazing feeling ever. So I get it. However, he's just throwing his shit all around, and then he's demanding for her to give him something to drink. And it's like, and she's like, "Oh, I made tea, but it's still warm." And he's like, "Well, throw some ice in there then." Like duh, and that's the attitude that I can't stand. Like, he reminds me of like a guy who thinks he's the king of his castle and he is living a Burger King life where everything is his way. And and I can't stand that. I just want to slap the ginger right off his hair if I could. But he's fictional, and that would be against the law if he was a real person. So
Yeah,
anyways.
you're right. Like, I wonder what time it is. I know it's after working at the flower shop, so you can't really tell what time it is. There's no context clues, but after, you know, like, homeboy goes and takes a shower, at that point, Jesus in bed. So I have no idea if this man ate dinner or anything like that, but he takes a shower and he comes out and she's like, bed is set up and she's in bed and she's like laying down. So I can determine that it's night by then. So he's come home
Mhm.
late, and I can get understanding like wanting to like you when you get into the routine of working. When I get home from work, it's usually like, especially in the winter, it's dark. Like, I leave when it's light outside, come back home when it's dark, and I only work one single job. Um I get home around, what, 6 or 7, I guess. And the first thing I do is
Mhm.
I wanna change my clothes. I wanna get into, like, loungewear and get comfortable for a little bit, eat dinner, and then after that, you wanna take a shower and do the whole routine. But I'm not quite sure what his routine was and how long he was in the shower. But by the time he gets out, it's time for bed, right? And he this is an area where I have feelings, and I'll let those out later.
Yes.
So he gets
Yes.
into the bed with Isu, who's asleep, and he clears his throat awkwardly, and then he proceeds to grope on her while thinking. Like, it's clear that she's tired. It's not like she's filled with energy.
Mhm.
And he's thinking to himself, I wonder how she still has all of her curves. And even though she doesn't work out or diet, not even my buddy's new girlfriend, the young one, has a body like hers. I guess Jesus really does have a nice body, though she always covers it up with these frumpy clothes. So she's wearing some thermals that are neutral color that kind of match the turtleneck that she wore to work, but it's not. It's just, loungewear.
Mhm.
And they pan in to show him like groping all over her body, and then he starts talking about her body and how like she has a better body than a young woman would. And then he goes into just look at this rack. And while like in the English webtoons, it is censored, so they don't actually show him groping her, her chest. But it does say, I can't even grab all of it in one hand. And then he's like, dang, I'm getting turned on. And he's thinking to himself, it's been a while, hasn't it? And then he realizes, he's all groping and grinding up on her. Then he realizes that she's not responding, which makes sense because when Homeboy came into the room, she was like the lights were off and she was already lying down in asleep. So he's thinking to himself, why isn't she doing anything though? And he like calls her. He's like, hey, Sue, you asleep? And she opens her eyes and she says, no. And then he's like, then why are you just laying there like a log? And then it begins. Then it begins the same
Mhm.
mode of communication that we saw in chapter 1. And Minchall goes on to say, you never act cute, funny, or cheerful around me. And now you're going to be a starfish in bed? You kidding me?
And all she can say is, "I'm just a bit tired. That's all. Tired." And then he starts in, "I have a job too, you know." And then he's like, stop acting like some kind of martyr when you're only working a couple of part time gigs. Whatever. Why do I even try at this point? And then he like turns over and he's like all pissy. Um,
Yeah.
so we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we will try not to trigger you with his reactions. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will unpack all of this because it is a lot to unpack.
Indeed, it is. See you soon.
And we are back. And when we last left off, we got the scene where Jesus' husband comes home and he gets butthurt because she says she's tired. Um, where do we begin, my beautiful flowers?
Mm.
I mean, I am like speechless, right? Because it's like, I have never seen so much entitlement, you know? And it's like, I get they're a married couple, and married couples want to do married couple things, but you just made her pick up after you like a maid.
Yep.
You barked an order at her to give you some tea and put ice in it, and then you announced that you were taking a shower. You didn't even give her the time of day. And I will give it to Gay Nim, as much as I hate her husband, I really do like this view of his back. Like I love how Gaynim draws her figures. And Gaynim, if you ever listen to this, I just want you to know I absolutely fucking love your art. Like I love how there's a lot of definition in his back. I mean, I hate his character, but I do love like how I do like the way this panel is drawn because you can tell that she has a very good understanding of anatomy and musculature, and
Yes.
it shows. So, anyways, art nerd done. But yeah, so I just can't get over him, and I hate how he minimizes like her contributions to their household by just saying, "Oh, you just have a couple of part-time jobs." And don't even get me started about the touching. You didn't even give her the time of day, but now you want to get touchy-feely and then talk
Yep.
about her curves, talk about her boobs. You're playing grab ass with her and she's not reacting, so that should tell you something. And then you think, "Oh, it's been a while, hasn't it?" And then he gets mad because she's tired. Now, I will say, just to be Captain Neutral, please don't hate on me. I can kind of understand why Minchol is a little bit upset, but I don't like the way he went about it. I like the fact that he
Hmm.
told her how he felt, and again, my beautiful flowers, please give Auntie some grace. But when you are in a marriage, it is very important to communicate how you feel, even when it comes to extracurricular activities. You know, because even though this story is told from Jesus' point of view, we still have to remember that her husband, even though he's a piece of shit, he has feelings too.
Yep.
And I will give him the fact that at least he told her how he felt, but the way he did it was very mean and malicious, and it makes me
Yep.
want to punch him in the face. Um, I really, really don't like that.
His
Um,
whole approach was abrasive, and
yeah, very.
nothing puts a woman in the mood by cleaning up your filthy drawers playing maid, and then after a long day of working herself, having to like work when you get home, my
Mhm.
jam. Um, and like he didn't even ease his way in to like trying to get intimacy. He was just very much like, I'm gonna like, I know she's sleeping, but now I'm just gonna start grabbing and groping with the expectation that she's going to all of a sudden be like enraptured and ready to
Mhm.
go.
Yep.
Which it's clear that there's an intimacy problem um with this couple because of the
Yes.
you could tell the way that he talks to her and talks about her doesn't really give romantic sexy times. And
No, it really doesn't, you know?
yeah, and we have no clue how many times something like this has happened, but to be honest with you, like, it takes 2 to tango, and he's not like, but it consent is needed regardless of whether you're married, in a relationship,
Exactly.
engaged, situationship, like, a one night stand, it really does not matter, it should always be consensual, and he didn't even ask if she was awake before he started gripping and groping at her, like, anatomy as if she's like a blow up doll, which is, like,
Yeah.
not hot. Um, and before that, as I said, you don't put someone in the mood by being blatantly disrespectful, right?
Oh,
So
totally. I mean, unless that's what you're into, but again, it goes
yeah,
back to being consensual,
being
and I
consensual.
yeah, and I honestly I think that's what bothers me the most is the fact that he just takes it upon himself to think, "Oh, well, she has a better body than my friend who has a young girlfriend." And it's like he thinks he's entitled. Like I said, he gives me like king of the castle energy, right? And I just absolutely cannot stand that because how dare you touch someone when they're trying to fucking sleep? And
Yeah,
especially after you talk to them like that. And that's why I find his character so problematic is because he has no respect for her. And,
done.
and she doesn't really defend herself, and more than likely it's because when she tries, he probably just yells at her some more. And I mean, and I get like he's probably like sexually frustrated because we do see that it's been a while since they've been intimate. And I can understand that to a degree, but there's a reason why she's laying there like a log, you fucking idiot. There's a reason. And you yelling at her like that is not going to make her be in the mood, like you said, you know.
No, it's not, like, at all. Like, and if you think about the previous chapter and how he was disrespectful to her then, and
Mhm.
then today, the same situation, like, you do have to realize that, like, words have meaning, and being horrible to someone does not make them want to give you sex. Um,
Exactly.
like,
Nobody
there
wants you to put their genitalia, your genitalia in their genitalia if you're gonna act like some kind of spoiled brat.
and I'll say this, I'm like, like, intimacy shouldn't be a tool for revenge, but, like,
Mm-mm.
this woman is, like, clearly tired. Like
Yes.
like, and she didn't even say, like, anything insulting to him, she just said, "I'm tired." He's like, "Well, oh, you think you're tired? I have a job too. Like, you just got that job, sir. Get out of here. I got a job too. You only work 2 part-time." Like, he, like, literally is berating her, and then he turns around like a child after he had his tantrum and just curses. It's like, "Damn it." And she, like, I feel bad for her because she, like, doesn't ever turn to him, she just let the insults land, and you could tell that
Mhm.
like, hurt her feelings. Like, is it such a hard thing to, like, be kind to people? I don't know. I was like, "You know what? Things get hard, things get tough, and kindness, especially in tough times, sometimes gets thrown out the window."
Yeah, it
But when
really
you're in
does.
you're in close proximity with someone who's like loyal and willing to remain in your corner and with you through the hardest of times, you should take a moment to self reflect how you treat the person who sticks beside you in the worst of times and in the best of times. Because I don't think he has that perspective. And unfortunately, um,
Yeah. I don't
that
think so
state of mind
either.
that state of
I
mind
don't
he has
think
is
so
not
either.
real. Like, it's crazy. And you know what? Let me tell you something. The way this woman has said she's tired, the following panels after this confrontation between her and her husband, where we clearly see at this point they're in a dry bed, in a dry relationship that's rife with struggle, we see what Jesus does. So it goes through it. It says, there's narration. It's not actually Jesus herself. It's a third party narrating now. And it starts off and it says, Jesus' day begins exactly at 6 o'clock in the morning. On the weekdays, she doesn't have to be to the flower shop until 8 a.m. But still, she wakes up 2 hours early to cook Minchal's breakfast. Of course, she makes sure to stay quiet and keep the door closed so she doesn't bother him. A new pot of stew boils on the stove every day because Minchal doesn't eat breakfast without stew and hates it when Jesus reheats leftovers. On most days, and then if it goes through a montage of just seeing her like getting ready in the morning, and breakfast gets laid down on the table for baby Minchal, and then we see her dressed and laying out the breakfast, and she looks at the time and she's like, oh, look at the time. And she ends up going to work on an empty stomach to make it on time, despite being the one who cooked breakfast. So every on the weekday, to make sure her husband has new, fresh, shiny breakfast, she cooks breakfast for him every morning, and she makes sure she does it 2 hours before she has to go to work. And she makes sure she doesn't disturb his slumber because she cares. And she does it without prompt. And because it takes so much time, because he doesn't like leftovers, she makes sure he has a fresh breakfast. And she works so hard for him that she doesn't have time to eat breakfast
I mean, okay.
on the
So
weekdays.
what I think is interesting about these panels is I like how, the start of this particular, part of the story, it starts with the cover, and we get like, there's like a little table with a notebook and then like
Mhm.
something else to the side, and then we see like the edge of like the futon or whatever it is they're laying on, and there's a
Futon.
phone that says 6 o'clock. So
Mhm.
this is obviously where this starts. This gives us like perspective on her day, and I mean, it's not bad enough that this poor woman has to wait on people at the flower shop and at the barbecue restaurant, but now she has to wait on this guy. And I mean,
Mhm.
this is like a 24/7 thing for her. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like angry, but it does make me angry because she has given him all the consideration that he is due as the man of the castle, right? She tries to be quiet when she gets up, she closes the door, she fucking cooks him breakfast, you know. She doesn't eat. She leaves, before she can eat because this man won't eat leftovers. And I mean, let me tell you, if I was his wife, he would probably fucking starve. I'll just tell you that right
Yeah.
now. I mean, so the fact that, let's not forget, the night before, he just walked in, took a shower, stripped off all of his clothes, like, then tried to get handsy and frisky, and then was mad that she was tired. And like now, we get a better understanding of why she's tired because she starts earlier than him, right?
Yeah.
But, oh, you just have a couple of part time gigs, whatever.
Yeah.
That's what makes me mad. Like, the expectation and the onus of the responsibilities of the house is like left to her. on top of trying to work and to help provide for their household. That's what makes me mad.
Now,
And
what Oh, go ahead.
mm. Oh no, you're good. I was done.
You know, this particular chapter, going back to what we were talking about in the very beginning when we talked about Jesus' figure, this is where the misconception comes from that this lovely lady is isn't supposed to have the figure that she has based off of inferences that are not necessarily correct. Very important because it's gonna come up more in chapter 2, but this is the start of it. So she wakes up at 6 a.m. and she makes breakfast. She has enough ingredients in the house to make sure that they have a fresh breakfast layout every 5 days a week. So they can afford to eat. However, because she's taking as much time as she does to make sure that his breakfast is ready, she ends up skipping breakfast in the morning. No one has ever died from skipping breakfast, but they can afford food. This is really important because I think if you ever take a trip onto social media, specifically one of those social media platforms that mimic the sound of a clock, you will see people frequently echo that the female lead's body is unrealistic because she's malnourished. Annoying. Where that's not
Very.
Yeah, it's annoying because nowhere in this story, newsflash, nowhere in this story has this woman been said to be starving so bad, but there's this inference and this common reference to this particular scene where she doesn't eat breakfast. And I've skipped breakfast before and has not died, right? So
Mhm.
another thing to be aware of is this woman's, even Mintrol's how does she stay so has a nice figure. How she doesn't diet and um she doesn't diet and she doesn't exercise. But one thing you should be aware of is that the lady that we know as Jesus in this particular story walks to work.
Mhm.
She lives in a neighborhood that has this crazy flight of stairs and she walks to work. We never see her actually commuting. So in the story when we have the going through her day, we see her walking to work. And she, comes in bright and shiny to work, smiles as she's opening the door to the flower shop. And, she's greeted by her coworker and she says, "Good morning." And she just gets ready for work. But here's the thing. And it goes back into what I was talking about with the misconception because she skipped breakfast this morning, this particular morning, her stomach growls. And she's putting on her apron and she hears it because her stomach is complaining. And she just says, "Phew, it's okay. I can wait until lunchtime." So she foregoes breakfast, but she has lunch, people. She works her night job when she goes to her night part-time job at the Korean barbecue spot. It's barbecue. She's not starving. Like,
Yeah, and I'm sure, like, with what we know of, like, the owners of the barbecue shop, I'm sure they, like, float her some, like, free meals, because like, most restaurants will do that, for their employees. Like, they'll give them,
yeah.
like, either a free meal if you're on shift, or they might give it to you at, like, a really big discount or something, and I mean, if you really think about it, like, a lot of the jobs that she has is, like, it's very active. Like,
Mhm.
like with the
On
flower
her
shop,
feet.
it's a lot of standing, but with the barbecue restaurant, I'm sure she gets in a lot. I'm sure she meets her 10,000 steps a day,
But with the
if not more.
walking
Um,
to work,
mhm.
walking to work and then potentially she's walking to work, she's walking home, she's on her feet at the flower shop, she's on her feet at the Korean barbecue. Mama lives in she's going down a flight of steps when she's going to work.
Yep,
She has to
and
go
going
up
up them when she has to come back.
when she has to come back. So she lives a very active life, which can be very draining, but at no point in time has this woman said, "Hey, I'm starving." She literally was just like, "I can wait until lunchtime." So she's gonna have lunch, right? So, I need to put that out there, and I just want to put a pin in that because, like I said to my listeners out there, if if you've read any reviews, you've looked at TikTok, you've looked at social media, common criticism is like her body is not, you know, her body is not realistic for the type of story it is because she's a starving like waif. Nobody ever said that. It's just that, like you never died from having your tummy grumble. The people intermittent
Mhm.
fast all the time, and
Yes, they do.
they don't like slip through the cracks in the floor. She eats, she
Well, I mean,
cooks,
it's
she
also
eats.
genetics too. Some people
Yeah.
just win in the genetic lottery. I wish I was one of them.
You know what? But if you had I remember being a server and I used to work doubles and triples, and probably the most fit and unfit I'd ever been in my life because working in the restaurant industry, you kind of like eat on the go. You're not
Oh,
starving.
yes.
You kind of like
Mm-mm.
leave your food to kind of die in the back area if you're doing a double. You
Yep.
eat, you're like socializing, you get home, you leave in the morning, and you come home late, and your body's accustomed, like habituated to like constant movement, and you're burning an intense amount of calories, especially if you're working at a busy place. And then you walk, and then she like adds on top of that by walking home and
Yep.
walking. So, like, this woman literally has a routine that keeps her in, a modicum of like nice shape. But at the same time, it's like I just wanted to put like the narrative that I constantly hear that like annoys me to no end is this idea that she's a starving waif, which never actually particularly stated in this particular story. It's just on the weekdays she doesn't have breakfast. That does
Mhm.
She gets the caloric content that she needs to to survive. It is okay. She's not a starving waif. Just wanted to put that
Yeah.
out there.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to point out real too is that if you really look at a lot of Korean cuisine, not that I am an expert, but if you really look at it, like a lot of it is like for the most part healthy. Like if you look at like kimchi and like some of the other things that they make like all these different side dishes, So I mean, and I get why people might say that, but I mean, if you really think about it, just because, you know, she's, make I have a feeling that like Jesus probably like, well no, because you don't see her with like a lunch bag or anything, but I have a feeling that like if she, she would probably be one of those that would like, make bring her own lunch, especially if she's on a budget. So I could easily see her doing that. But like but a lot of like Korean food is actually pretty healthy for you, like one of the things that, one of the I guess philosophy question mark behind the food is that they want you to be nourished, they want it to be good for your body. So, it would make sense to me that like she would be in like really good shape. And cuz also too she probably can't afford to eat like a bunch of fast food. So yeah, like I agree with your assessment. Like I think it's possible for her to have that shape and honestly, like I also think she won the gene pool lottery, so there's that. Um but anyways, I step off my soapbox.
Yeah, like there's healthy dishes, like kimchi's great for, like
Oh, I love
digestion
it
and
on
for the gut.
burgers. I
I
love
love
it
it
on
any
burgers.
way I can get it, to be honest with you. There are, like any modern society, everybody has their like healthy and unhealthy, things.
Oh,
Like it's something
totally. Yeah.
convenience store culture, that combine, like this situation is very much like comes in clutch. Um and I know in like in Asia, specifically, like, for Japan, but also in Korea, like, the convenience store cannot be beat. Like, you get something quick, tasty, but not sometimes not necessarily the most healthy, but freaking tasty. Like, you get some ramyun and you guzzle that down and call it a dang day or get, like, a rice ball or something and live your best life. But there's
Man, I
quick
want a
and
snack now.
I know, right? Like, I'm kinda like, let's get some spicy rice cakes, get some street food, man, which is not healthy
Yeah.
actually, but it's healthier than the crap we consume in the United States.
Oh
Uh,
god, I know. Like, I've
but
been trying to do this thing now where I'm trying to eat, like, less preservatives, and it is really hard. But
I mean,
anyway.
everything it's snuck in there. That's another conversation for another day.
Mhm.
But like
Yeah.
preservatives are like
Different
in every
podcast.
different podcast. But I just want to let you know, especially in the United States, our regulations via the FDA aren't that great. But stuff is in our food that we don't even know because it's not on the ingredient list. And you know what? It is
I
what
eat
it
it
is.
anyway.
Yeah, well, you gotta eat to live, just
Yeah.
like Nae Sue does.
Just
She
like
eats.
Nahesu.
Yeah,
Mhm.
she eats, okay? It's like, take that narrative and just, like, let it go. Mama eats. Anyway, so we're back into the storyline, and, she's getting ready for work. She put on an apron. She basically just, like, told her stomach to pipe down. She's gonna wait to eat at lunchtime. So the door opens, it's, the little chime letting everybody know that a customer's coming in, and there's a welcome. And then we see that our favorite rose guy has made it back to the flower shop. And unlike yesterday, when she saw him like actually paid attention for the very first time in the months that he'd been coming in, she's back to kind of zoned out and like disassociated, where she's not necessarily looking him in the eye. She's kind of focused on the touchscreen that's in front of her, and but he comes to her anyway, and she says, "Is there a certain flower you're looking for today?" And he responds, "Yes." And he's like watching her with the intense eye contact, and he says, "There is a certain flower." This is a loaded scene. Okay.
Man, I am clutching my pearls because I love the flirtation here.
Yes. And she
And I
looks
also
up.
wanted to and real quick, I also wanted to point out real quick, and sorry for interrupting, but
No
have you
worries.
noticed how like sharper like the images are and how brighter the colors are in these couple
Yep.
panels? Did you notice that?
I did notice that it's a deeper, even though she's still wearing like neutrals and it's muted, the actual and actually the rose guy is wearing a leather jacket and black, he's wearing all black still, right? So it's a stark contrast.
Mhm.
But her color palette has deepened in like the richness of like what the not the contrast. It's a I
Like,
guess
she's got a very neutral palette, but I feel
yeah,
like the colors are, like, a little bit more vibrant. Like, they're still
vibrant on yeah.
muted and they're still, like, neutral, but they're, like, I don't know, they, like, stand out more. They're not as, like, drab, if that makes sense.
Yes, and they're not as
Like, it's
washed
a
out,
warmer
so
tone. It's a warmer tone, because like, if you look at, like, the one scene where he's, like, looking directly at her, like, even the blues kind of have, because there's, like, a shelf or something, like, just behind him, like,
mhm.
even that has a warm tone, so you can tell that, and I feel like this was, like, a conscious choice, to have warmer tones because I feel like it kinda sets, like, the mood and the tone for the interaction between them, because we know that, like, he's obviously into her, which is why he wanted her to take his order. And I feel like he's kind of exuding that warmth, because obviously, like, flowers need warmth to grow. And I feel like that's what's going on here. But
They
it,
need light to grow, to be honest with you,
yeah.
sunlight, photosynthesis, but, like, she was I guess it's, like, when he approaches and she greets him, she wasn't even looking, then she realizes when he responds that it's the rose guy. Um, she's like, "Oh, it's him again, the rose guy," and she steps into her customer service role. She doesn't like the another before I even go into like what she says, I wanted to just point out that the rose-colored lenses are off on this because he doesn't have the like the dust motes and the shiny like filter that we saw earlier in the chapter when she first paid attention to him. It's just normal lighting.
Mhm. But it does look warmer though, you
I
know?
agree with you on that, but I just wanted to
Mhm.
point out that like I don't know. I'm just gonna say it's like the sha la 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 la. It's gone and it's gone
The
into
anime
like
sparkle.
yes, where all that's missing in the background is actually like if you've ever seen like the Josei or like the manhwas where it's like here's the male
Yeah, where it's
lead.
like a bunch of flowers and, like the Sailor Moon kind of like with the roses on the corners. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But you know
Beat
what though?
Shoujo.
Yeah. But you know what though? That's what I kind of appreciate about this because like the one thing that I really like about Gangnam Style is that how like, clean, a lot of her drawings are. Like even the
Yes.
backgrounds cuz sometimes the backgrounds are just kind of like, oh, it's a background. But even I just like how everything is like balanced, cuz like if you like go back to the panel where Teha and Heisu are looking at each other. Like it's very balanced. Like you have, like things you have different things going on his side, but then her side is plain, but then you have like the computer or the register that's like slightly slanted and then you have like that roll of like paper or whatever. It just kind of like balances everything out, and I don't know, like I went to art school, and obviously I studied art, so like stuff like this I really like to nerd out to just because I love elements of design. And I love the color choices. Like I really think like the warm tones like really add to this. And I know I said it before, and I'm starting to repeat myself, sorry.
No
Um,
worries.
but I just can't I'm just gushing, I just love really good art. I love it when like there's very good color palettes, I don't know. Anyways, let's move on because this is not Artcast.
Ah, I mean, we could have a whole conversation on color theory, which we are actually having it anyway.
Yeah.
But
Anyways.
yeah, back in the story. So now that she recognizes who it is in front of her, she asks him, "You're buying a bouquet, correct?" And he says, he responds, "That's right. 10 roses as usual?" "Yes." And he responds, "Yes." And she's typing in his order and she just thinks to herself, wow, his voice is just as nice as his face. Low, slow, and so polite. I wish I could hear his voice. Like, I don't care what
Yes.
version, Korean, English, whatever. I want to hear his voice because part of me wants this to get turned into like an animated series, but I don't have the power to make that so. But if it was, that man would have to have a low, slow, and polite voice. He speaks to her very politely. Um, and then she thinks to herself, maybe I wouldn't mind listening to him talk for a bit. You and me both, baby. And
Yeah.
she hands him the receipt, and she just says, "Would you mind taking a seat? We're backed up on orders, so it might take a while too." And then her stomach, who was like whiling out earlier, when she told her stomach that she would wait until lunchtime to eat, her stomach growls loudly, and she pauses because both of them pause actually because his eyes widen. So he doesn't remark anything and he's like staring at her and she's just looking down and he seems taken aback. But he like takes the receipt. And I love this like series because I'm gonna tell you guys now the way that the author draws hands, going back to the beauty of the way that he or they, we don't know who gave him actually is because no pictures exist on the interwebs. We know nothing about the artist other than the
They're
art.
amazing.
They're amazing in the art, but Gainem actually shows men's hands in a way that just chef's kiss. And we
Oh
see
yeah.
a panel of him reaching, and then he goes and he like reaches out and his fingers are within millimeters of I get mere centimeters of her fingers
Centimeters or
as he
millimeters, actually.
millimeters as he like takes gently like slides the receipt away from her off the counter. It's like he takes the receipt. So like you can see the distance between their fingers as a like an individual panel, and her hand's so much smaller than his.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she's thinking to herself with good reason, she's thinking, she's embarrassed. She's like, "Did he hear that?" I feel like it was really loud. So she felt like her stomach growling was really loud. She's like, "How embarrassing." And you can see her like looking down and she's kind of flustered and she like holds her stomach. And then we pan to a picture of a cell phone and someone sending a text message and it says just two words, coffee sandwich. And she's still thinking, she's still narrating because it's her inner dialogue. And she says, "No, I'm sure he didn't notice." And we see the roast guy sitting in a chair waiting for his bouquet to be made. And it pans out to show him he's the one with the phone in his hand. And he sent the text for a coffee and a sandwich. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say that, like, I've never I know hands are can be very hard to draw, you know,
Mhm.
but I do love the way that Gainam draws hands. And I know that has been a big topic of discussion on the Discord. Um, and I know that we have some BL lovers who absolutely adore Teja's hands.
Got a nice
Eh,
set of clampers.
yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder things, and I will just leave it at that because this is a mostly PG-13, I guess. But anyways,
Who
but
said
yeah, but
that?
but But just seeing but just seeing, like, how, like, he interacts with her, like, it's I don't know, like, I love the fact that, like, he heard it, but he didn't say anything, and you can tell that he's trying to be, sensitive, because obviously that really is embarrassing, like, you're trying to, like, conduct business, and all of a sudden your stomach, it just starts yelling at you, because it's like, "I'm hungry," and he's doing his best to keep like a straight face and not embarrass her. So you know what? Good on him. He's a
Yeah.
good egg, you know.
Oh, he's a great like it was clear that he noticed, but he's discreet and he has, he's couth enough and polite enough not to comment on it. Lord knows if it was Minchal, he probably would like,
Yeah. Why don't you eat? Oh my god. But getting back to the voice thing for a second, like,
yes.
my headcanon says it's Alex Lee, the guy that does the voice of Jinu on Solo Leveling. I don't know why, but my headcanon says that's what his voice sounds like.
Oh, Gina's voice is it's I you know what? I imagine it lower than that. And I am not an expert on the voice actors, unfortunately. Um, but I'm gonna come back to that because luckily for us, this will not be the only time we have a conversation in this story about his voice. I'm gonna come
Yes,
back to
that's
that,
true.
and when I do, I'm gonna tell you who I envision his voice actor to be. TBD. That's gonna be another episode, dear listeners. So keep it, keep hanging on, because I'm gonna come back to it. I'm not gonna forget.
Yeah, and hey, I'm all for it. I'm here for the ride.
Amen. Listen, I'll start like binging a bunch of content to be like, all right, this is the K drama guy that I want you to listen to know who I'm talking about. So going back into the story, there was a conspicuous absence of her coworker who was very chatty Cathy in the yesterday, right? But we now pan to see her coworker carrying a box, and she looks and she's like, "Huh?" because she probably was in the back somewhere actually doing work for a change, and she sees the rose guy outside the shop. He hasn't gotten his flowers yet, and she like exclaims, "It's the rose guy!" And she sees his back, and she also sees him talking to a guy, and like a guy that's about his height, and he's very tall too, in a suit, wearing a white shirt. And she thinks, because we know that she's nosy, she's thinking, is that his friend or something? And when Rose Guy turns back around, we see in the background, it looks like the guy that he was talking to is turning and getting into a car that's parked nearby. And he's walking, and he has an iced coffee in one hand, and he's like carrying a sandwich in the crook of his arm. And, Nosy Rosie is continuing to like view him and like watch him. And she's thinking to herself, gosh, he even walks like a freaking model, which he does. He's
Mhm.
definitely, and she thinks to herself, he's definitely over 6 feet tall. And then we pan to now the light shining back on him, because he's like the talk of the town right now for the coworker. And he walks back into the shop carrying the sandwich and the coffee that he texted for, and the light, it like
Giving this like halo effect around his hair.
halo. Yeah, he's illuminated from the back. So like it's, his back is still a light source, and it gives him a halo effect. And instead of the like dust motes and the like glossy, like rosy, like shimmer filter, it's more so he's just illuminated
Mhm.
completely
Yep.
from the shoulders up. Like, all right, angel face. Um, but yeah, like that coffee and the sandwich, he's gonna have himself a snack while he's waiting for his roses, right? Because he's got time, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, you got to do something. So, and I just think it's funny how like Ponytail Girl, i.e.,
Right.
Casey's coworker, is like. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, if it were me, and if I were, back there doing like whatever, because I mean, work is boring. You know, I ain't gonna lie. I mean, I there are interesting things, but most of the time when you're at work, you let your mind wander a little bit. So
Mhm.
honestly, I probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say at least she's not like going out there and being like, "Hey, who's that?" Da da da. But honestly, I would probably do the same thing too. Because I mean, he is a very intriguing figure. He's a man of mystery, like a Manhwa tuxedo mask, kind of.
Without the mask, but he and he has the roses too. All he's missing is the mask, the top hat, and the cape. At this
Yep.
point,
Yep. Yeah,
throwing
and I
roses and
have
being useless.
opinions about tuxedo mask, but that's a different podcast. But anyways,
Listen, I said throwing roses and being useless. Thanks, guy.
I
He's just
mean,
aura farming
yeah,
in every episode.
yeah,
Anywho, you're right. That is a
yeah.
different story for a different
Different
day.
story for a different day. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, as you like to say.
That's
I
true.
mean, I will say that the good thing about Ponytail Girl is that she's giving us a little bit of perspective. Like we're getting to learn about his character a little bit. Like she's the exposition character, I guess, question mark. Because we see that he's like talking to some guy, but we don't know who this is. But
Right.
but because she's like looking at it, she's like, is that his friend or something? But honestly, like the first time that I read this, I was like, I wonder if he's like a bodyguard or something.
Yep.
Um, so I mean, at least we're getting a little bit of perspective, with the way that he dresses, and that, he has some guy, bringing him like coffee and a sandwich, we can probably tell that he's well off. And like she's like, gosh, he even walks like a freaking model. He's definitely over 6 feet tall. Whoever his parents are, thank you for passing such incredible genes. And then like Ponytail Girl's like standing there with like, anime flowers because she's, all into this dude. Um, you know, and I guess this kind of like lets us know like how hot this guy is. Like not that we couldn't already tell, but sometimes like I feel like we need this to kind of set up an expectation for a character, and I think she helps do that. As nosy and pushy as she is, she has her uses. um,
She does indeed. I do wanna point out something that I noticed immediately. I'm not necessarily a car enthusiast, but I am. Um, and when so we get the hint that he at least has some authority because he texts 2 words and somebody delivers it to him while wearing a suit, right?
mhm.
Now, another thing to notice is in the scene where we see his back, him receiving the goods he requested, there's a nice car there. Now, it's not easy to identify the car, um, but it's a luxury car. I'm just going to be honest with you. Um, which will be unveiled in the future. And then he turns and leaves, and we see the person getting like turned towards the car itself. So I'm not sure if he arrived in that car or dude drove up with the car and then delivered the goods, but an awareness piece here. Um, going
I mean,
back to
it's
like
not DoorDash.
it is not DoorDash because that's then uh, there's something more to this. It's not just a delivery guy who will just walk up to the door and give them food. So and we already know it's not DoorDash because he just said coffee and sandwich. There was no platform or app. It was a text
Yep.
message.
Mhm.
So that is an indication that this man is able to command a presence without he doesn't say please or thank you. He gives commands and it got completed. So when he walks in with this coffee and the sandwich, um our coworker who's the our
Expositional
persistent
character.
expositional character and enthusiastic glazer of the rose guy thinks to herself, whoever his parents are, thank you for passing on such incredible genes. And you can see her like kind of like zoning out as she's watching him. And there's like finally we get the little flowers, but they're all around her head because she's kind of zoned out. While meanwhile, Jesus, like she's had this box and she's been holding it while she's like basically staring him down, giving him the googly eyes.
Yeah.
And Jesus is like finishing up a bouquet of roses that she's gonna give to him. Mind you, this bouquet of roses, I noticed this and I'm just gonna put this on your radar too. Like when she makes a bouquet of roses, she wraps it in this deep black wrapping paper.
I've
But
noticed that too, but all the other
yeah,
ones seem to be like newsprint or something like that.
yes.
So it kind of makes me wonder if maybe, she's doing this like subconsciously. Um, I don't know, but I mean,
I don't know. I
I
just
mean,
noticed that.
yeah, like I've noticed that too, but I mean, honestly, like, we don't know much about the Rose guy, and to be fair, we don't know what he does with these roses. So, I mean, mystery and mystery. Um,
Mystery
so
and
yeah.
mystery. And then if you think about it, roses are a luxury good. So it could be, presenting such a sleek package with, the sophisticated wrapping. But I find it interesting because it's literally the a nice display of flowers is also just wrapped in newspaper. It's very interesting. I don't know the significance of it, but I do want to put it on the radar because we're talking about color
Yeah.
theory up in here.
Oh yeah. Well, we like our color theory.
Yes, and it's very important. So
Yeah, it really is.
she finishes the bouquet and she hands him a bouquet and says, "Here's the bouquet of roses you ordered." And then we just see his back as he's leaving, and she tells him to take care. So from we see his back as he's leaving out of the door, and on the countertop is a sandwich. And Jesus notices that he left the sandwich behind. So she picks up the sandwich and runs out of the store. And she says, "Excuse me, sir." And at this point, he's like drinking his coffee. He's got his bouquet of roses and he's on his way to who knows where. By the way, the car is gone. He's just walking down the street and she like catches up to him and she tells him, "You left your sandwich." And he pauses and he looks down at her and it's like a close up of just his gray beautiful eyes and the iridescent filter is back. It's back when this close up and he replies, "Oh." And then he replies, "I left it there for you. It's a gift." And Jesus taken aback and she's just like, "Wait, pardon?" And she stops him, like, she grabs onto his jacket to stop him from leaving, and she says, "Sir, this is a Wendy's." No, she doesn't say this is a Wendy's, but she's like, "Sir," and she says, "I can't take this." And he looks at her, and he's, like, still turned to go, but he, like, looks back at her, and he gives her, like, this little foxy smile, and he's like, "Why not?" And she said and then he goes on to say, "Is it because you don't have anything to drink with it?" And this time he turns and he looks at her and he's holding the coffee and the iridescent filter is back and she's like looking up with at him and now she's flustered because he's kind of like
All up in her
looming over
space.
her. All up in her space and looming. So he went from being turned, he turns around, and he like looms over her. And he's like, "You don't want the sandwich because you don't have anything to drink with it?" So he offers her the drink in his hand. And he says, "Here you go. I only took a sip. Don't worry, I didn't poison it." And now Jesus is really confused because she's like, "What do you mean?" Now he like continues to hold this out until she takes the his
Coffee.
slightly used iced coffee. He's like, "This one's a gift too." And he like, he smiles at her and he's got this coquettish, like, look on his face, and all there is, like, question marks from a girl because she's like, "What? What? What?"
Yeah. And then that's where the chapter ends.
That's where
Um,
the chapter ends.
I mean, what really surprises me is the fact that he would offer his drink because I feel like I know there's like a trope, um,
Mhm.
mostly in anime, I want to say about the whole like indirect kiss thing.
Indirect kiss. Yep.
Yeah, which I'm just like, oh brother. So I wonder I'm kinda surprised that, like, she's, like, considering taking it, because I'll be honest, like, if some random guy gave me a sandwich and then it's like, "Oh, you don't want it because you don't have a drink here, I only took a sip," I'd be like, "No, that's okay, you can keep your drink."
Yeah,
And I
keep
mean,
your
it's
drink.
not like, not to be, like, funny about it, but I mean, obviously, this is, like, post-COVID, so I mean, even before COVID, I don't think I would have done that if it was somebody that I did not know because you just don't know what people will do. Um, but I'm kind of surprised that she's like actually contemplating it here.
I think she was taken aback, but given that he already gave her the sandwich, I'm pretty sure that she wouldn't want to dispute and she like may take the drink just not to be rude because she
Yeah.
already like tried to stop him and he said, "No, that's your sandwich now. No, this is your coffee. Take it." So she probably is gonna take it. We'll see in the third, chapter
Yeah.
3. But like, I agree with you in this world where like um germs and pathogens can kill ya. I wouldn't take it. I wouldn't drink it, but I might even take it and be like, "Oh well, if you don't want it, I'll take it." But then once I get into the back to
Yeah, dump
wherever,
it.
dumping it, because sir, I do not know where
Yeah,
those pretty lips have been, as pretty as they are.
exactly.
I don't know where you've
Exactly.
been,
But
sir.
the other thing that I wanted to point out too was the fact that like how considerate was that of him to, get her a sandwich after he heard her like stomach growl. You know, like I feel like I think this is kind of like a big moment for them. I mean, obviously it's the beginning of the story, but
Mhm.
I feel like this little interaction here, I feel like it kind of sets the tone for their relationship,
Yep.
or the relationship to come. Because it's obviously he's looking out for her. And I mean, obviously, there's attraction there, so of course he's going to want to do, something nice for her. I mean, I don't think he would do that for just anyone. But the fact that like he thought enough of her to get her a little something to eat is like big. And I mean, she doesn't know him from Adam at this point.
Right.
So, the fact that like a stranger, showed some kindness, and like the first thing she does is she tries to give it back to him because she thinks he left it. And to be fair, it's not like he told her, "Hey, I wanted to get you a little something to eat. I figured you'd be hungry." No, he just left it there. Like how is she supposed to know that it's his? But I think I almost want to say this was a calculated move. It makes me wonder if maybe he did it on purpose so that she would come talk to him.
Oh, yeah. I think honestly, we're like there's been some context clues that this man has his eyes on Yusuf and has like been watching her for a while, at least for months. Obviously, that man is a calculated move, but I don't think that he considered that she would run out and like try to give the sandwich back because they haven't had any interactions. I think he was a little surprised that she actually like do it because literally he's been a blob of a human to her for like months.
Yeah, that's true.
Months. Like
That's
I'm
true.
surprised that she like the way that she's described herself as like going through the motions and being an NPC and just focusing on work and her husband. Rather surprised that she noticed quickly in his absence that there was something else there when she had ignored his presence
Mhm.
for so very long, which just
Yeah.
makes like you think like waking up from a trance and like seeing the bigger world around you is something that's a like is this going to be a recurring theme with her or like is this an awakening of some sort? But I think could tell from their interaction and his expression that he was pleased that she came out to like address him.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I don't think he calculated so far as to think that she would actually run after him with that sandwich. But then he was like, you know what? I'm gonna one up this situation, and I'm gonna give her this coffee, and that indirect kiss is totally a thing. And I think he was thinking that he's like, you know what? I might not get the indirect kiss, but I'm giving it to her. He knew what he was doing. And he
Yeah,
drank
he
more
he
than one
did.
sip. He was
He
sipping on that
did.
coffee when he came in the door, girl. Like came back into the like flower shop. That man, like one way or another.
Yeah, he had some flirt energy going on, like, for
Hold
sure. And you
on.
know what? I am all about it.
I am
I'm
too.
all about it. Flirt with her, boy. Flirt with her. Auntie gives her blessing.
You know, the thing is I don't think she's accustomed to this kind of attention in any way. So she was very flustered. She was very confused. She's like, "Whoa, no, what's happening here?" And I get
Yeah.
why she's that way because like it's clear that she doesn't notice these kinds of things, and she's just like, "What is going on?" Let's see how she takes it in chapter 3, though. Like, let's see how she like spins this situation because her nosy Rosie, the coworker, already thinks that that man wants her
Yep.
real bad.
Yeah. She's
And
gonna have a lot to say.
yes, she is. And I can't wait to relay this nonsense and tomfoolery she will potentially say in chapter 3 about this sandwich that this man got delivered just for her and that, you know. The kiss coffee.
Mhm.
Kiss coffee. It's wild.
Oh,
Huh,
man. Well, I mean, tropes are tropes for a reason.
indeed. He's like, I'm gonna get a first kiss out of you one way or another today.
Yep. Imma get what I want.
Your attention. He's winning. He's winning because she definitely knows who he is. She doesn't know his
Yeah,
name. He's a rose guy. We know his
yeah.
name.
But man, that last panel though, oh my god, he looks so handsome.
So
And he looks
handsome and
really young. Like he has like kind of I don't want to say a naivete, not necessarily innocence, but
boyish.
there's something almost kind of pure about like the way he's looking at her. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't give me like creeper vibes. He doesn't give me like I'm just trying to hit on you vibes. Like I feel like he's like when he tells her, "Oh, this is a gift too." I feel like he's being very genuine with her. And I'm
Yep.
wondering like how she's going to receive that because she's the type that is going to question why somebody is being nice to her
Yep.
you know and I would really like I don't know I just want her to just enjoy the gift of food, seeing as how her husband couldn't even be bothered to like bring her something or check on her. But anyways, that's a
Yeah, listen.
conversation for another episode.
And we'll have plenty of episodes where we can talk about it. No
Oh yeah.
problems there. But this has been a good episode, and I really
Yeah.
dig the color theory, and I hope that this deep dive into each of these chapters continues to like unveil elements that we didn't even notice before while we were frantically frothing at the mouth reading each chapter.
Yeah, like I will say that that is one of the things that I look forward to the most with this podcast is being able to look episode by episode because there's really a lot to break down.
Yeah.
Like I feel like color played a very big part of this because even if you look at the last couple panels, you see how like sharp the images are and how vibrant the colors are. And I know I keep harping on it, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but I really feel like it really adds to the story. Like, I feel like people underestimate, you know, color, especially in the context of a story. Because like even if you like look at movies, like like movies absolutely have a color palette. Like if you look at like The Ring, for example, you notice that there's a lot of cool tones like blues and grays. And if you look at like certain parts of Lord of the Rings, there's more like, especially when it comes to like Mordor, you see like a lot of
Yes.
like reds and oranges. And I mean, it just adds to like, the aesthetic and the mood, to like the story or the film, So, I mean, I don't know. I could wax poetical about it all day, but overall, like, I thought it was a good chapter. It just makes me feel bad for her, like what she has to put up with at home, and the fact that like nobody outside of her home knows what she's going through. And it's like she's going through it all alone and she thinks she's like washed up and old. And I hate that for her. But I'm hoping that like now that she got a little flirty action from the Rose guy, I'm hoping that this will, begin to, well, we know what happens, but in the lens of reading this as a first timer, it made me wonder like, if she was gonna, maybe give him the time of day, slide into DMs, whatever the young kids say these days. So
Mm,
I guess we'll see. And what did you think of this chapter?
loves this chapter because we're getting to see the very beginning, which is, I mean, that's Captain Obvious to say, but there is something to be said about like recognition in that moment when you like meet eyes with someone who you find like attractive, and even like just that because we're privy to the inner dialogue of the character, at least Jesus for now. She was just like, you know what? He has such a nice voice to go with his attractive face. And then she briefly thinks to herself, I wouldn't mind listening to him talk a little longer. And while she's not like, oh, I want to like date him, she was just like, you know what? I could listen to him talk longer. And I was just like,
Mhm.
girl, you don't know. A voice will seduce you.
Yeah, well.
A nice voice to go with a
Oh
nice
god,
face,
yes.
politeness, and that man actually went out of his way without being asked to like give you something without any other condition. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't ask for a hug. He didn't try to touch her in any inappropriate way. He just said, "Hey, oh, you don't want the sandwich because you don't have a drink? Here's a drink. My
Yeah.
drink."
I love that about him.
Yeah, you know what? Those little subtle things that we know she clearly lacks in her current situation. I personally am not a fan of I don't like cheating narratives, to be honest with you. I'll read those stories. I don't like netarare, as they call it in the manga world. I prefer that you end something to begin something, but we'll see with the story. Time will tell.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but
It
for
will at that.
now, like, she's done this is just harmless fun, and I particularly like to see it because it's clearly like, he's clearly eye flirting. Like, one of the things I like about his character and the way that he's drawn, the rose guy, is that his eyes are actually pretty expressive, and there's a l they he's drawn in such a way that there's a level of stillness to the rest of his body, but even if he's not turned, his eyes focus, like, you could tell what he's focusing on. It's kinda like he
Mhm.
gives a little, I don't know, it's like a sly eye movement.
Yeah, I think he speaks a lot with his eyes, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like,
Yes,
like I
it's
mean,
expressive.
yeah, like there is the saying like the eyes are the window to the soul, which is why like a lot of like anime and even manhwa, they are drawn with like, the big eyes because I mean, let's face it, like, eyes are expressive, just like mouths.
Mhm.
Those can be
Mhm.
expressive. So, and I agree with you. Like I feel like, he has like a quiet energy. Like like I think black suits him very well for a lot of reasons because black symbolizes like power and, and I also think that like he communicates with intention. Like he may not say a lot, but when he does speak, it's with intention and purpose. Just like I
Mhm.
feel like with Jesus, when she does something or gives something to someone, she does it with intent and purpose. And I feel like that's how he is. Like he's sincere. Like he sincerely wanted to give her that sandwich, and he sincerely wanted to give her, the iced coffee, because, obviously he heard her stomach growl. So,
Yep,
he's just trying to, one, get her attention, and, two, he's just trying to look out for her.
yep.
Um, so
Good
yeah, I
job
agree
on
with you.
getting her attention. Yes. He got her
Yeah.
attention intentionally, and he
Mhm.
asked for nothing in return. Just sent her on her way.
Yeah.
Can't wait for us to actually deep dive into chapter 3 and get it up and ready for you guys.
Yeah, I can't wait for chapter 3. I mean, I can't wait for all the chapters, I'm going to be honest, but anyways, well, my beautiful flowers, that about does it for this episode. So thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed listening to our podcast. So please feel free to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. You can find us on Discord at the Withered Flowers Discord. We'll have a link in the description. We have a very lively bunch of folks there. We also do live chats on Fridays when the new chapters come out. So please feel free to join us. And we also have a YouTube channel where we upload some shorts and sometimes some panel discussions. So there is that as well. So that is it. We hope you enjoyed this episode. So thank you for listening, and we will see you soon. Bye. The Withered Flowers podcast is hosted by Digital Gurl and Auntie Lura. Produced and edited by Auntie Lura. Music is Bodega Cat by Dayala. If you would like to join our Discord, please see the link in the show notes. And special thanks to our family, friends, and spouses that have supported us while producing this podcast. We would also like to thank all of our Discord members as well. Without you, we wouldn't be here. Until next time.